Hi, everybody, and welcome to another The EAP Counsellor podcast. We're very excited to have you listening in today, and I'm equally excited to introduce to you my special guest who I'm going to be talking to, someone who is very passionate about well-being and extra passionate about holistic healthcare and well-being as well. So today I have Dr. Mick Rowe with me, who is a chiropractor and founder of Grove Chiropractic in Ocean Grove. Mick has a passion for holistic natural healthcare that acknowledges the body's inbuilt cleverness. And I really love that. And I know when I have had conversations with Mick, I definitely ask about the body's inbuilt cleverness, and hopefully he might tell us a little bit about that today. But Mick, for Mick, this wasn't always the case. His introduction to chiropractic care was a sore back. It was a pretty typical entry into the world of chiropractic for some people. Mick injured himself playing tennis as a teenager and couldn't play the sport that he loved. Coincidentally, his tennis coach was also a chiropractor who he saw following his injury to help him to get back on the court. A few memorable things stood out to Mick from his first visit. His chiropractor assessed his body holistically. He wasn't solely concerned with treating his symptoms, but addressing his underlying cause of his back pain to prevent it happening again in the future. And I think that is, an amazing approach too. He was also introduced to the very obvious but previously unquestioned truth that his body was clever and could heal itself. This idea that lasting health didn't come from taking medications or cutting out body parts was a significant light bulb moment for him. Mick continued to have regular care to avoid missing any more tennis, but also because having care proactively made him feel generally happier and less stressed at school. Mick's own personal experience receiving this holistic and natural health care sparked an interest in him to further explore what contributes to human health and well-being. He undertook tertiary education at RMIT in Melbourne, completing a 3-year Bachelor of Health Science and a 2-year Master's in Clinical Chiropractic. It is with great pleasure that I welcome Dr. Mick to the podcast today. I love, Mick, what you're all about. You are an absolute professional. Your knowledge is just amazing on all things chiropractic, but also wellness, well-being, holistic care, and everything like that. And you're just genuinely passionate. So it's with pleasure that I welcome you today.
Thanks, Lou. We've always had very great discussions in past, so I'm looking forward to chatting today.
Yeah, absolutely. Mick and I, in the past, were in a business networking group together, and Mick was also my chiropractor. And when we had coffee chats, it was we always went over what we thought was, dedicating an hour, say, to a coffee chat. We were able to surpass that time and just keep talking and talking and talking because we're just so interested in holistic care and the nervous system and, everything that hopefully we'll be talking about in our interview today. So I'm sure we will have lots to say, and maybe I'll need to be checking the time. Otherwise, it could be a very long podcast.
Sure, we'll do our best to stick to time.
Absolutely. Tell me, Mick, as a chiropractor, what are the most common complaints that you, whether, observe, hear about in your clinic?
Good question, Lou. I think for the longest time, chiropractors were kind of well known as being proficient in looking after things like back pain, neck pain, headaches, which we have a great track record of caring for people with those things. I guess what's exciting with the research that's coming out now is more of a brain-based model of chiropractic care. So we've known for a long time that the way that the spine works impacts brain function. A lot of research is coming out now to support that idea. And I guess the implications of that is sort of relevant from looking after people with things that are not traditionally back pain, neck pain, headaches. So, for example, in the last week, I've cared for a primary school age boy with tics and anxiety. I've
Hmm.
looked after a pregnant client who's looking for just a balanced body for better birth outcomes and a well pregnancy.
Yep.
Uh, I've looked after, some of my older clients are in their late 80s, and we're looking after them to help them maintain their balance and just stay generally well. A large demographic of people that I look after
Yeah.
are busy mums. So mums
Okay.
have the demands of running and maintaining a family and ferrying kids to school and back and to sports and extracurricular activities. So, yeah, it ranges from things like, yes, back pain, neck pain, headaches, which we're great at looking after, to things like anxiety, poor sleep, immune dysfunction, hormonal issues. The scope is quite wide.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really intrigued. Uh, What age is your, or would your youngest client be, and what age potentially is your oldest client?
So, my current oldest clients would be in their late 80s.
Hmm.
At a previous practice that I worked at, I looked after a guy called Cliff, and he was still coming in his mid to late 90s.
Wow.
And then all the way to the other end of the spectrum, we've looked after, young babies that have been days old, if they've had any sort of, in utero stress or
Hmm.
a stressful birth, then they've benefited from having a checkup too, just to assess if there's any neural dysfunction.
I love that. So no 2 days are the same.
Absolutely not. No.
No. And I'm also curious to find out, you mentioned that you have a lot of mums who come to you and work with you. Would they potentially display similar symptoms or need similar care, or it that varies as well?
Look, it does vary individual to individual. By nature of mums sometimes being exposed to similar life demands,
Yeah.
they might be subject to similar stresses, and as a result, their care may have, similarities between them. It's not uncommon to see I guess a stressful or somewhat overwhelming set of, life experiences and
Mm.
circumstances result in pretty typical things, interrupted sleep or insomnia, hormonal stress, digestive issues, anxiousness or hypervigilance. So those sort of things all happen as an end result of that stress response being activated. So
Yeah.
regardless of how that stress response is activated, sometimes that manifests in similar symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Interesting. I guess you're asking for a friend, I'm definitely don't sit in that demographic, do I, Mick?
As
Also, curious. As you know, I work in the workplace wellbeing space, or work quite heavily in that space, which I love, and I know you love as well. If you were, or like when you're working with, and this might be too general, and please tell me if my question is too general or vague, but do you see a pattern in regards to health concerns and or symptoms from working age people, who are in the workforce doing the daily grind and everything like that? Are there any patterns or not necessarily?
No, there are certainly patterns. And for a lot of us, it may vary between each individual profession, but we're all subject to some extent to stresses in our workplaces. So that might vary from the tradesperson who has quite a physically demanding job and has to use their body, for the length of their day.
Yeah.
Uh, at the other end of the spectrum of more of a corporate or cognitive worker that has to sit in front of a desk in front of a computer for 8 hours a day. So from a physical point of view, yes, there's different demands. And then,
Mm.
from a cognitive point of view as well, too, there's obviously stresses that we subject ourselves to in terms of running businesses or having to interact with other employers or employees. So all these things can certainly show up, differently person to person. But work stress does represent, a form of stress that our body has to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just so good that the care that you provide and what you're able to do helps to alleviate, the stress in the body, and you're able to, create practical solutions for people. It's really good.
Certainly. And I think one of the main things we know is that the way that our body works impacts everything that we do. So
Mm,
having a body that works well allows us to, perform best at work. It allows us to exercise as well as we can. It allows us to be as good a parent as we can or a good a spouse as we can. So no doubt the way that our body works impacts every other aspect of our life.
absolutely. And, it's all the healths, isn't it? Physical health, emotional health, psychological health. It's all well-being. And the more that we can look after each area, obviously results in better functioning, mood, health in general, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And not to
Yeah.
neglect any aspect of those. Sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that health is just about our physical well-being.
Yeah.
But we know people that are in quite physical shape that have other areas of their life that are not necessarily great and well-rounded and balanced. So it's important to have an even kind of balance across the board within those domains.
Yeah. Um, Another curiosity question here. Because you're seeing, lots of people in lots of different age ranges and professions and everything like that, are you able to pick up on, say, the different areas of health outside of physical health where a person might be struggling, and then, refer them to other people as well to help them out? Is that something that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess chiropractors are because we're quite broad in our scope. And we are sort of interested in the way that stress impacts the body. We do have to verse ourselves in a whole bunch of different areas. So that might be from sleep hygiene to exercise to nutrition to stress management. And as a result of things being quite broad, we can serve quite a good role as a bit of a generalist on people's
Yeah,
healthcare
nice.
teams.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I look after, and I use this myself personally. That my chiropractor is usually my first stop for any healthcare issues, concerns that I have.
Yeah.
From there, obviously in life-threatening circumstances, it would be different.
Yes.
But in that sense, we can sort of see where people are at. We can help people to the degree that we can. Obviously, if there's scope for more specific guidance, or it is a skill set that is outside of our general scope, then
Yeah.
we're pretty quick to, have that discussion that, hey, there might be some other people better suited. And as a result, we've built some really good connections with other
Great.
practitioners in the area to be able to refer out and co-manage people much better.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And I'm all about that too. It's putting teams around people if they need, more than one person, modality, specialist. It is, yeah, surrounding them with the people and the services that they need.
Definitely. In
Yeah.
very few cases is it a one size fits all where you only need one practitioner.
Yeah.
Health is so vast, so it's supposed to have people that are experts in their niches, and you have access to all those, as opposed to people that are generalists and might be somewhat limited in their scope and how much they can
Yeah.
help you.
Isn't it good too when you build up your own network and connections, to be able to refer or mention names rather than, someone having to go and Google search, find a special a specialist in a particular area, when you build up that network, it's so great to be like, it makes the process so much quicker, doesn't it? To say, well, here's a few contacts that I know and trust that you could reach out to if you need to.
Definitely. And the majority of those practitioners that I do refer to, I've used myself personally. So
Yeah, great.
just allows you to make that much stronger recommendation, knowing that you've had experience with this practitioner and that the client that you refer to them is going to be well cared for.
Yeah, awesome. That's so good. Chiropractic care is described as a way to enhance connection between the body, environment, and people. Could you elaborate on how chiropractic care fosters these connections in our day-to-day lives?
Of course. So, as it relates to the body part of what you mentioned there, we know that the way that the spine works influences the way that our brain and nervous system works. So, our
Yep.
nervous system, just quite generally, is responsible for, how we live our lives. We live every aspect of our day-to-day life through our nervous system. So if there's any interruption to the proper functioning of that nervous system, which, joints in the spine that don't function properly represent, that can interrupt that proper function or optimal function of the nervous system. So obviously, if the nervous system's role is to govern things like the food that we ate for breakfast and use that to, turn that into new cells, our immune system, we don't have to think about. It happens beneath the surface without our having to do anything. That's governed by the nervous system. Basic things like our heart rate, our breathing, these are all functions that we don't have to consciously think about, nor would we want to.
Yeah.
And ultimately under the governing function of the nervous system. So if the nervous system functions better, obviously it has the ability to maintain all those functions and connections between brain and body better.
Yep.
Obviously, our body's in constant interaction with its environment. So, we take food from the outside and we, use that to power our body.
Yep.
If we were at altitude, for example, our body would sense that, okay, there's less oxygen at altitude. It would increase our breathing rate and our respiration rate and our heart rate to deal with the different circumstances in our environment. So, yeah, that nervous system is responsible for, you know, the internal versus the external environment, adapting us to our surroundings so that we can maintain balance or what we call homeostasis.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Fascinating the amount that our body automatically does. And then what happens in the body when there's change to the environment, and then also when stresses are added in, and what happens then in the body. It's really interesting.
It is, and it's something that happens, from the second we're born, quite innately without our having to do too much. So to have, I guess, an appreciation or a reverence for that, I guess,
Mm,
inbuilt capacity to heal, it gives us a different context for when we do face those stresses,
yeah,
and it gives us uh, a different attention when we're experiencing bodily symptoms that aren't necessarily pleasant. I think one of the things we do from quite an early age is we separate our body from our environment. Uh,
mm,
we then view symptoms as mistakes that our body has made that we have to correct or fix, perhaps without acknowledging that the way that we're living our life, our environment, the foods that we eat, the amount we sleep, the amount of movement we get, all these things strongly influence the function of our body. So sometimes it's about realizing that, yeah, we've got a larger part to play in our own health.
mm,
That it's not just a body that's broken and is dysfunctioning. Oftentimes we lead lives which contribute to that intelligence within our body making the changes that it does and giving us symptoms sometimes as feedback mechanisms.
yeah. So for you then, in your clinic, you're looking at the whole person and the environment, and uh, everything, in order to treat the client how their body needs to be. Um, it's more than just bones in alignment, out of alignment. You're looking holistically, and it's almost like problem solving, isn't it? To really work out what's going on and not going on to then provide the care that's needed.
Definitely. It's absolutely problem solving. And I think that's where oftentimes clients will come in, and it's not uncommon for people to come in and see, a chiropractor as a last resort, having tried a number of other medications without luck, or other practitioners, or they've just not had the results that they want to see.
Mm,
I think part of acknowledging the environment side of things is acknowledging, all right, well, if all you're doing is getting a symptom treated, yet you're going back into the same environment which caused the symptom in the first place, inevitably you're going to run into frustrations with
mm.
those problems coming back down the track. So it's not uncommon for people to, say, as a basic example, just have pain. They might have back pain. They might have taken medication for it. And yes, it might provide some temporary relief. But if they go back to living the exact same lifestyle without addressing potential causes of the pain, saying
Yeah,
they're sitting down for, 15 hours of the 16 hours that they're awake, uh, then inevitably, if they go back to that environment, they might run into the same issues down the track because the pain is the way that the body is trying to signal a it's a cry for help in that sense. It's like a call
yeah,
or a request for some sort of change.
yeah,
So in that instance, symptoms are never mistakes that we just want to treat and make go away that so we can go back to the way we were living our life. They're usually calls for change and
mm,
doing something that's perhaps not in our best interest, overall.
yeah. Makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Do you think that, or do you take on an education sort of role with your clients to help them to understand what's happening in their body, in which to, I guess, create practical solutions rather than the band-aid, a band-aid solution? Like you're thorough with your approach and the service that you provide. But I guess what I'm hearing or thinking is that you would be educating people as you're working with them as well to explain, what's happening and what you can do about it and what they can do about it.
Yeah. Often it's a case of like, in a large number of instances, we know what are the blatant stresses which can contribute to our problems. I
Yep.
think sometimes we just have to acknowledge those. So because the source or the range of potential stresses and problems can be quite vast, you think of all the potential stresses that you can encounter. It's
Yes.
not necessarily a case of like, educating every little thing and going through every part of a person's life.
Hmm.
Often if there are blatant causes, people will sometimes intuit that. So it might just be me asking some questions, why do you think this is happening? Or, when you experience these bodily symptoms, is it after, a certain stressful event, or is it in relation to a certain activity that you're doing? So there is some basic, I wouldn't call it education as much as it is questioning and just
Yeah.
inviting
Okay.
some
Yep.
dialogue with the client in that perspective.
Yep.
If there is education, it's largely around probably more of the nervous system health side of things. So
Hmm.
acknowledging that we can talk about or educate about adaptability or resilience. And rather
Yep.
than sort of cherry pick and try and identify every single possible stressor, we can
Yep.
say, all right, well, in a nervous system that works really well, it will adapt to stress as well as it can. What
Mhm.
are some of the things that we can do that improve that adaptability or resilience? And then we can
Yeah.
talk about sleep and we can talk about movement and we can talk about fueling our body. So it's not a structured educational process in that sense because
Hmm.
each person is quite different and their life
Yes.
circumstances look different.
Yep.
There is some basic education that would be, I guess, similar client to client,
Yeah.
acknowledging that nervous system component will be
Yeah.
involved to some degree.
Yeah. And, that's building awareness, isn't it? client to client. We can't change what we don't know, or what we haven't been introduced to. So having those conversations alongside what the chiropractic care as well, you're really helping the client to understand themselves more, which is empowering.
Definitely. Awareness is key in everything,
Yeah,
isn't it? Especially
it
when it
is.
comes to behavior change.
Yeah.
And using myself as an example, I often know the things that I need to do for
Mm.
whatever reason. Sometimes I just don't put those, into action.
Yeah.
But if someone else asks me the question, "Hey, how's your sleep hygiene going?" and I know that
Yeah.
I'm staying up a little bit later than
Yeah.
usual, I'm like, okay, I know what I need to
Yeah.
do.
Sometimes it just takes that other person, just, a little reminder, doesn't it?
Does. Reminders
Yeah.
are helpful. That's the beauty
Yeah,
of having a team and people in your corner.
absolutely. You mentioned the word stress, and we've actually probably mentioned it numerous times in our chat today. But I want to draw our attention to stress because it's a word that I hear every single day from people in workplaces. And it, they just describe, I'm so stressed. My work is stressful, life is stressful. Um, it's a term that gets used, I guess, to describe so many things as well. And I'm sure you would hear the word stress a lot in your workplace as well. And we know that stress has a profound impact on well-being. And if we talk now workplace well-being, can you tell our listeners or, help us out with how does poor, say, spinal function or nervous system health affect someone's ability to manage stress? And, how can chiropractic care help with this, with stress?
That's a great question, Lou. And now that you mention it, it's funny that we talk about the word stress and we perhaps don't clearly define it. Uh,
Yeah.
I think part of the challenge of that, and you know, I haven't clearly defined what stress is either. I think part of the challenge is that is we all know what the word is, but we can have different definitions of what that is.
Mm,
So, without diving too deep into, I guess, research, my
yeah.
sort of basic definition is any demand for a change from the body to its environment. So, if we look at the way that our body works, there's a term which we call homeostasis, which just means balance. So, our body
Hmm.
tries to maintain some sort of balance. If the temperature in our environment increases, then we sweat to cool us down. That's a basic sort of need for change. So we could view, temperature change as a stressor,
Hmm.
and that's a potential stress to our body. So it's any demand for a change within our body. As it relates to stress, I guess people are pretty well versed on like that, as you mentioned, that example before with workplace stress or life stress or that busyness sort of feeling of overwhelm. I guess as a general take on it is when we see that constant need for change is somewhat overwhelming,
Hmm.
or we're too far away from what we call that balanced center, that homeostatic, that central range,
Hmm.
then we'd probably consider that or define that as a stressor or a stressful experience. So if we couldn't adapt or we're struggling to adapt to bring us back into balance, then that would obviously represent a stressful experience. So I guess as chiropractic care relates to it, by nature of us being able to change the way that the brain and nervous system function, we can change what we call the stress response.
Hmm.
So the stress response is obviously something that our nervous system has to keep us safe in our environment. Say if a tiger jumped out, 10,000 years ago when we were searching for food out on the savannah, a tiger jumps in our environment, our nervous system would detect that and initiate the stress response.
Mm.
So our heart rate would increase, our blood would divert away from our internal organs to our muscles to either fight or flight.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a freeze response and a
Mm.
fawn response, as is the case with the current nomenclature and the way that it's defined.
Yes.
But that stressful response changes the way that our body works. Ideally, we move into fight flight response, and then after we've escaped that threat, we move out of the stress response into what we call a parasympathetic state, that rest and digest and repair system.
Yeah.
So the way that, I chat a lot with clients about, the general stress is
Mm,
that we're stuck too much in that activated fight flight mode. It might not be to the same degree that we would be experiencing if there was a tiger in the room, but
mm,
it's a combination of small little stresses, the lack of sleep,
yeah.
the appointments, the financial stresses. All these little things can accumulate, initiating the same stress response
Yeah.
and result in more chronic stresses, which are largely the cause of all of our health problems today.
Absolutely. And I am talking to having sessions with people who are experiencing a chronic stress. Yeah, exactly what you're saying, and where the nervous system's just switched on all the time, and they're in that survival mode, and they're at a point where they actually don't know, or they've forgotten what it's like to not be turned on and right up.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess as it relates to chiropractic care, like our hands-on work is quite good at shifting that physiology and that body back into that rest and repair mode.
Hmm.
And yes, a lot of the lifestyle advice that we might hint at is really geared towards that too. What are the things that we can do that move us out of our sympathetic response or our fight flight response into rest and repair? And we want to be able to do that in a way that is practical. We've got a set of
Yeah.
alarms. I know you've had Nat on the podcast
Yeah.
previously, like
Yes.
using your breath as a resource to calm yourself. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, escape from the stressful circumstances and have a 2 week holiday or do a 10-day silent meditation retreat.
Mm.
It's, I've got 20 seconds while I'm sitting in the car before kid pickup from
Yeah.
school. Can I take a couple of deep breaths and move my body back into, a
Yeah.
rest state?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And giving people options of there's different ways we can do it. And, there is something for everyone out there in regards to trying to calm the system and look after ourselves as well. So those little conversations and conversations, and linkages are really important for people.
Definitely, because what represents, a beneficial tool for one person might be, something that activates their sympathetic system.
Correct. Yes.
You do have to be selective in finding what works best for the individual.
Yeah, absolutely. If we can talk workplace well-being and work like holistic and proactive well-being programs is what I'm all about, because we want to be able to cater for everyone, knowing that everyone's different, and I'm all about customizing and personalizing well-being programs in workplaces. Do you see chiropractic care fitting into holistic well-being programs in workplaces?
I do. And I know there's some uptake with some, bigger corporations that do have chiropractors on their well-being teams that
Yeah,
can provide care in that respect. So from a hands-on point of view, absolutely, because oftentimes if there is a stress component, if there's a nervous system that's not functioning as well as it could, hands-on care can improve the function of that nervous system and brain. And then obviously from an educational point of view too, because we're so well versed in sleep hygiene and other lifestyle adjuncts, we can certainly provide help or education and resources across those domains too.
yeah. Um, I have heard of or do know of businesses that have partnered with chiropractic clinics where they may give a discount to the to employees, say, of that workplace, or as you said, provide education workshops and things like that. And I think there's so much value in that.
There is,
And,
and some practitioners they work in-house, and then sometimes it's that the the businesses and the employers are happy to, yeah, help with sending people or encourage people to send, private clinics uh,
Yeah,
outside of the workspace as well.
that's great. Are you able to give, say, advice, recommendations around ergonomics in a workplace?
Yeah, so obviously in more of a corporate workplace, ergonomics do represent a factor in terms of what that person has to deal with. So, yeah, from things like sitting and standing postures, standing workstations are being adopted a
Yeah,
lot of the board now, and rightly so because we do know that sitting does represent quite a stress to our spine.
yeah.
So ergonomic setup, it is. It's one of those uh, very small stresses, but because by nature of people working, 6 to 8 hours a day in front of a screen over a 5-day work week, over a 30 to 40-year career, it's something that, like most habits, small things can accumulate over time. So
Mm,
definitely a worthwhile consideration considering what your, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old self wants to look like down the track if you are in a sitting role.
absolutely. And again, we can't change what we don't know. And having someone who knows and is aware to help too is really good.
Absolutely.
Mick, I just love talking to you. As you know, like we always have so much to talk about and could talk all day, which I could today. But I am aware that our listeners um, have other things that they need to do today as well. Um, before we say goodbye and before we find out where people can find you, because I definitely can vouch for Dr. Mick as being a fantastic chiropractor and an all-round great bloke and guy as well. Um, for you, what's something that chiropractic care has given you in regards to your own well-being
Mhm.
that I guess has been a game changer for you?
Yeah, that's a
A
really
tricky
good question.
question, and sorry, and I've thrown a curveball.
Oh, it's a great question because I think I'm so grateful for what chiropractic has offered me. Um, I was a chiropractic client before I was a chiropractor, so
Yeah.
all I guess the space that I really advocate people receiving chiropractic care from is more from my experience. I've been a chiropractic client much longer than I've been a chiropractor, so I've come to experience firsthand just the impact that it can have on your mental and physical well-being. Like you mentioned in my intro, I initially had the idea that health was something that came from the outside in, it
Mm,
came from a pill. And if that didn't work at some stage, you went and saw an authority figure and they might, cut out a body part. Um, and it's totally flipped that idea or that philosophy on what health is. Health is
mm,
such an inside out process,
yeah.
uh, as are many other aspects of our well-being and our contentment and our happiness.
Mm,
Uh, so yeah, it's really allowed, I guess, a totally different viewpoint on life. When you have the idea that your body is clever and that your body's working for you, it takes so much of the resistance and the fight out of things. I think
yeah.
my dealing with clients, people come in almost at wars with their bodies,
Mm,
trying to fight and trying to control. Whereas when we acknowledge that there's this really innate cleverness, this wisdom inside our body that, thrives to express itself at all times, when we can work with that,
mm,
life is just so much easier. So, yeah, physically, mentally, emotionally, it allows you to deal better with stress. My sleep is improved. My strength is improved. My mobility is great.
yeah.
So, yeah, I've never been as strong and able as I am at the moment, and
Great.
yeah, certainly has led to that in large part.
That's fantastic. And for everyone listening, Mick definitely walks the walk, talks the talk. And you do the work for you, as much as you look after your clients and help them. You're, a walking testament for chiropractic care. So well done to you.
Thanks, Lou.
No worries. Now, before we say goodbye, where can people find you, Mick, if they wanted to find out more, if they were interested in starting a chiropractic journey, or, if they were after a new chiropractor, if they were moving new to town, where do people find you?
Sure. So easiest way would probably just be my website. So we're local to the Bellarine and Ocean Grove area. So the website is grovechiro.com.au.
Yep.
People can make an appointment here or they can just reach out. Oftentimes we have people make an email inquiry just to say, hey, got this going on. Is this something that you could help out with? That being said, too, if you're not local to the Ocean Grove or Bellarine area, chiropractic's a small community, but it's a big community. So
Yeah.
I know of a lot of practitioners that are, around Victoria and Australia. If you're looking for a contact for a chiropractor in your area, I can certainly make recommendations for people if I know of practitioners that I could suggest. So that would be probably the easiest way.
Great. Excellent. That's how I found you. My Wangaratta chiropractor, when I told him that I was moving to Ocean Grove, said, "You wouldn't believe it, but one of my best mates is a chiropractor in Ocean Grove."
That's it.
Yeah, and there we, yeah, introduction done. So yeah, it happens, and it's really good to have that network of people.
Definitely.
Yeah. Mick, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you giving this time to me and to our listeners. I absolutely know that people will have got a lot from our conversation and just all of the information that you have shared with us today. So thank you for your time, and thank you for your care of people and really helping people to live happier and healthier lives as well. So yeah, thank you to you. Um, anyone, reach out to Dr. Mick if you are interested in finding out more and interested in chiropractic care. Thank you for listening, and we will be back soon with another podcast episode. But thank you from us today, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you, everybody.